Iran's elections over, attention has once again focused on two aspects of the future of this growing Middle East power. The one that gets the headlines, of course, is its potential nuclear weapons and what some believe is the prospect of Israel trying to take them out. The other is the discussion initiated by the United States designed to end confrontation and limit Iranian hegemony in the region. Welcome to Agenda. I'm Colin Chapman, and joining me to discuss this core geopolitical issue are Stratfor's George Friedman and Robert Kaplan. George, if I can come to you first, we now have six world powers apparently stiffening their resolve on the nuclear issue, and these include Russia and China, who vetoed the original UN resolution.
I'm not sure I regard diplomatic posturing as stiffening anything. What we've really seen is that the Russians and the Chinese, under pressure from the United States and Europe, have both made gestures in the direction of both Syria and Iran, but nothing definitive. So, for example, the Russians have made it clear that they would not give President Assad asylum in Russia, but continue to oppose any intervention. So I don't really see a great deal of stiffening. You have the Israelis threatening the Iranians, the United States warning the Israelis not to go to war, and most of the rest of the world siding with the United States.
The Israelis like to talk of a countdown to a nuclear Iran, but there are suggestions that the Iranian government may be clearing the Parshin site of any nuclear arms-related experiments. That has echoes of Saddam Hussein. When the IAEA finally were allowed in, they found nothing.
Yes, it's very interesting. First of all, let me define why Iran is important. Iran has frontage not just on the Persian Gulf, but on the Caspian Sea. On the Middle East, two, not one, main oil and natural gas areas. Secondly, Iran fronts not just the Middle East and Mesopotamia, but Central Asia as well. So Iran is really potentially a regional hegemon with influence deep into Central Asia as well as out to the Mediterranean. It is building pipelines and roads throughout the Central Asian countries. This doesn't get into the newspapers often. We're obsessed with Iran's Middle East prospect, but it also has potential influence in Central Asia. And what's preventing that is the fact that the Central Asians, frankly, are secular, they're nomadic, they're not enamored by a clerical regime. And were the regime ever to shift or change, we might see the full force of Persian culture throughout the whole area. The fact that Iran is, cleaning up this nuclear site, it has echoes of Saddam Hussein. I think that the Iranians do respond to pressure, but it has to be extreme pressure. Remember in 1988 when the USS Vincennes accidentally shot down an Iranian civilian airliner. The Iranians didn't think it was accidental. They thought it was deliberate, and they thought we were stiffening our resolve, and that was one of the incentives they had to finally end the Iran-Iraq war. So pressure does work on Iran, but it has to be concerted. It has to be almost extreme pressure.
I absolutely agree on the fact that Iran is the regional power. Iran's real problem has been that it has constantly been denied, in its mind, its rightful place. First by the Ottomans, then by the British, now by the Americans. It has always seen itself as the legitimate dominant power in the Persian Gulf. And this was true not only under this regime, the clerical regime, but also under the Shah of Iran. He also felt exactly the same way. So what we have now is this window of opportunity opened with the American withdrawal that they're going to try to take their place. And I think one of the things is not that nuclear weapons are unimportant, but first, it's not clear when they're actually going to have a weapon that can be used. And secondly, even if the Israelis manage to take out their nuclear reactors, their conventional capability, their geographical position, the position not only in the Persian Gulf, but in the Caspian, as Bob pointed out, that makes it a serious problem. And the thing to remember is destroying their nuclear weapons really doesn't solve the problem.
Let me just add a footnote to what George says. Not only do they dominate the Caspian, but they have almost 1,400 miles of seaboard on the Persian Gulf. The next biggest country with a seaboard is the United Arab Emirates, which is only 700 miles. So Iran has twice as much Persian Gulf seaboard as any other country on the Gulf.
And let's add to that they are the dominant power effectively in Iraq right now.
Yes.
If Assad survives here in Syria, as he's likely to, in my view, it's going to mean that the Iranians are going to have tremendous influence over him, and we finally extend that to Beirut, where Hezbollah is. So you have from West Afghanistan.
You have the Iranian empires of old, whether Parthian or Achaemenid or whatever. You have the Mediterranean to the Indian subcontinent, almost.
And that's what's really serious about this. I mean, the thing that's really serious about Iran is not the nuclear weapon. We can understand why Israel is obsessed about it, because Israel is really, in a way, the only country threatened by it. If they wished, for ideological reasons, to attack Tel Aviv with a nuclear weapon, that would be devastating to Israel.
George, if they're clearing that site where Iran has been believed to be developing nuclear weapons, would that be sufficient to deter Israel from launching an attack?
It's not clear that Israel has ambitions. It's very strange for a country that has ambitions to mount a sneak attack to be broadcasting it in every venue that it could possibly find. The Iranians do have air defenses. The Iranians do have the ability, under warning, to move their equipment. I mean, it's very difficult to believe that the Israelis are really so confident in their military capability they can afford to warn the Iranians that they're coming. So I don't think that the movement will deter or not deter or do anything, because I don't think the Israelis are serious about coming. Among other reasons, as I've said before, they're not serious about coming because the blockage of the Straits of Hormuz by Iran would devastate the global economy. They're not able to go unless they can take care of that. They don't have the force to do that. The U.S. Navy would have to be the ones doing that. And therefore, statements that they are going to attack without prior warning to the United States, if they want to, are really saying that they're prepared to attack and allow a devastating economic crisis to sweep the world. They may be willing to do that, but I doubt it very much in the end. So I think the Israeli threats about the nuclear weapons are really not the critical things here.
Remember, Israel's greatest strategic asset, as Moshe Dayan said in 1977 when Menachem Begin appointed him foreign minister, was Israel's close relationship with the United States. And Israel's relationship with the United States has to remain extremely close. So so one of the inhibitors to an Israeli strike is causing a drop in the U.S. stock market by 1,500 points, oil prices at the gas pump going up to $5 a gallon. That could turn the American public from being passively pro-Israel to suddenly being perhaps hostile. And that has never happened, really, in the history of the U.S.-Israeli relationship. So that's an inhibitor to an Israeli strike. One thing, though, that may engender an Israeli strike is, unlike other countries, whether the United States, the Soviet Union, that had strategic depth in a spread-out landscape and therefore could engage in deterrence. Because at the end of the day, if the Soviets had taken out St. Louis and Kansas City, the United States would still have gone on as a country. The same with the Soviet Union. Israel has no strategic depth in that regard. The Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, Haifa ink blot of population would be either killed or with cancer rates so high from a nuclear strike that it could seriously threaten to end the country's existence as it has gone on before. So it's a very fraught situation.
I want to add, to that, if the Israelis genuinely believed that an Iranian nuclear strike were going to happen, they would respond regardless of any of these considerations. But it's simply not clear that the Israelis have believed this in the past, nor are they behaving like a country that is about to mount a sneak attack. it is very important to distinguish between what the Israelis say and what they're going to do. And the reason we say that is they've had periods of warnings like this where they did nothing. Again, it's important not to obsess over the nuclear issue, because frankly, the threat from Iran is enormous and comes from issues other than nuclear weapons. It comes from the fact, as Bob said, they're reestablishing the Persian Empire.
I'd just like to ask both of you, in the short time we have left, about the domestic politics of Iran. We've just had the first parliamentary election since the controversial presidential election of 2009, and it was billed as being a showdown between the two opposing conservative forces, but neither side really won. Will this affect the situation in any way, or are they united on foreign policy?
I think one of the problems in having a rapprochement with Iran is that power is divided. There are different power centers in the country, so that one can undermine the other if one were to decide to take a foreign policy risk like a rapprochement with the United States over the nuclear issue. Remember, Nixon and Kissinger could engage in 19th century court diplomacy in China because there were only two men that mattered, Mao Zedong and Zhou Enlai. Power was centralized so the Chinese could make stark changes in their foreign policy. That is not the case in Iran. The fact that power is not sufficiently centralized makes it harder for the Iranians to make bold decisions.
And one might add the fact that the United States is hardly united, that is deeply united between the Republicans and Democrats. The ability of Obama to reach out to the Iranians is severely limited by political realities of an American election. So as in almost all cases, you have a domestic political dimension intersecting with a global dimension.
George and Bob, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that's Agenda. I'm Colin Chapman. Thanks for being with us today. Goodbye.